And for more on the trade tensions between China and the United States, I'm joined by Stephen Lande. He's the president of the advisory firm Manchester Trade. Thank you so much for joining us. Just want to get your thoughts on Secretary Ross's appearance on the Hill today, on Wednesday. He faced some pretty tough questions from some members of the president's party, the Republicans. Can they persuade the president to back off on some of these tariffs?
Well, why don't we start as to the reason for the problem that's focusing on steel initially. There's a problem of overcapacity in the world. There's a problem that the U.S. is producing well under its capacity ability, and there's a possibility that some countries, it is also true that some countries like China have really been taking market share from other countries. That's what's on the table. The U.S. has suggested OECD global talks on capacity that steps be taken. Those steps have not been taken, so the U.S. is now going to the next level and saying, we will make sure at least that we have a viable steel industry, and they make the argument, of course, near security.
What about all the other threats that Trump has threatened in the last day or so with $200 billion more, $200 billion more?
Every request that this administration makes is always based on a negotiating objective. Mr. Trump comes from New York. I come from New York. We negotiate. In this case, it's very clear. On China, guys, it ain't fair. You know, you have intellectual property rights rules. You put pressure on our people to give you intellectual property, free access in our market. We need that thing changed. We have a concept they call substantially equivalent competitive opportunities. I'll give you one example that came across my desk today, something called hazelnuts. The U.S. has a duty of 7 cents, maybe 2 or 3% equivalent. China has a duty of 25%. When they take the retaliation, which they did on steel, it's up to 40%. That duty has to go down, not back to 25%, but it has to go back to a lower level. So again, he has his request, and the same is true in automobiles. We want to have similar duty on all the products and so on. And on NAFTA, I, for one, believe that NAFTA will be completed before the U.S. election. And by the way, that will also solve the steel problem between the U.S. and Mexico and U.S. and Canada.
But how far can you go, I guess, in your rhetoric and talking before you really offend the other party? I mean, there's a deadline here. We could see something happen on July 6th. Secretary Ross said today that, or he's calling this, an ongoing discussion between the U.S. and China. Is it an ongoing discussion when you're seeing sharper words and threats flying back and forth? I mean, the language is getting pretty heated.
But may I remind you the language that they use in discussing North Korea and the U.S., Rocket Man, absolutely crazy, you know, and so on, and how quickly it turns. Trade negotiators are very hard. But our job, no matter what country you represent, their job is to protect the interest of their domestic producers. In order to get there, you have to increase the rhetoric of the conversation. At the end of the day, when you come in agreement, everybody shakes hands, everything's fine, everybody forgets those conversations. My view is too early to call this a trade war. Let's see what happens from this kind of a discussion that's going on, even if the rhetoric is hard. And remember, we've never had a president before like President Trump, who does love negotiation, and so far has been fairly successful, whether you look at taxes in the U.S., etc.
All right, Stephen Lande, interesting comparison there with DPRK. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.